Welcome back to Rising. Niall, what is in your notes today?
One that I think you're going to disagree with, Robbie. There's a political conflict that we maybe don't talk enough about. It's the growing, simmering tension between the United States and Europe. One of the biggest ingredients driving this growing schism is MAGA's attacks on Europe on cultural grounds. Trump and his allies often draw a picture of European nations that is unrecognisable to those of us with some first-hand knowledge of these places. I see this myself often. People regularly pop up in the online world telling me about how Ireland or Britain are being taken over by foreign hordes, usually Muslim, or have become a police state or some other kind of nightmare hellscape. I roll my eyes at that every time. Please visit Dublin or London. They're great cities, and they bear no resemblance to Elon Musk's dystopian fever dreams. Anyways, debates over free speech are also a big part of the issue. Europeans do believe in free speech, but broadly speaking, they tend to exclude incitement to violence, egregious bigotry, or outright defamation from that category. Americans tend to do less of that. That's a difference of opinion and outlook. It's not the end of civilization. On Saturday, a Trump administration official in the State Department, Sarah Rogers, made a video which she posted to X, dramatically announcing she was able to make it because she was, quote, travelling on a diplomatic passport. And in it, she cited examples of the supposed horrors of European censorship. When I checked early this morning, this tweet had more than 6 million views. And guess what? Every one of the examples Rogers gave, every one, was at a minimum more complicated than she made it out to be. Let's take a look.
As I tweeted a few moments ago, a German woman notoriously received a harsher jail sentence than a convicted rapist after the woman called the rapist, quote, a disgraceful pig.
A report in this case from the right-of-centre Daily Telegraph in Britain, no less, includes a vital paragraph buried very deep down within it. The woman in question, it noted, quote, was sentenced to a weekend in jail after her comments because she had a previous conviction for theft and had not attended the court hearing for the case. By the way, I personally would not defend the lenient sentences in the rape case that was mentioned there, but they were issued largely because the perpetrators were, legally speaking, juveniles. Next.
Similarly, a British woman was dragged out of her bath by 11 police officers after she referred in a private text message to a man who allegedly violently assaulted her as, quote,
This is the Elizabeth Kinney case in Britain. It's much murkier than Rogers makes it appear. Another right-leaning British newspaper, The Sun, notes deep in its story, quote, none of the messages or context were fully read out in court. The Kinney case is made even more complicated because the complainant here was a female friend, or I guess former friend, who seemingly felt threatened or alarmed by private messages Kinney had sent her. The Sun reported that, quote, abusive and homophobic text messages were sent to the victim here being Kinney's former friend, quote, causing her alarm and distress. Next.
And victims of violent crime aren't the only people who lack free speech rights in Europe. In Sweden, an activist called Rasmus Paludan was jailed after he burned a Quran and referred to Islam as gay Islam.
First of all, Rasmus Paludan makes an unlikely hero for free speech warriors. His political movement wants Islam banned. In any event, it's not quite clear whether he was actually jailed. He was certainly convicted in 2022, but just in October, an appeals court in Sweden partially acquitted him. At issue is the question of whether Paludan's actions amounted to criticism of Islam, which very much is allowed under Swedish law, or whether it was incitement and abuse of Muslims, which is not. And here's the last example.
Finally, in Germany, a man faced a criminal investigation for referring to Green Party leader Ricarda Lang as, quote, fat.
According to a German magazine, citing the fat comment as the driver of this case is, quote, simply not what is happening, end quote. The user in question also allegedly posted an image of an obese white woman in a sexual act with a black man, accompanied by a caption that translates as, quote, Ricarda Lang is now personally processing asylum applications as well. that posting at the very least has the potential to run afoul of German defamation laws, as well as measures intended to protect public figures, particularly women, from being the target of harassment using sexualized images. Again, this comes back to the bigger point. Is it better or worse for public discourse to allow vigorous debate, but to disallow incitement, abuse, and defamation? I would argue the European model is clearly better, and that the absence of such protections has made American public discourse crude and degraded. But of course, there is another question here as well. It's the Trump administration posing as vigorous defenders of free speech. The president who tries to get late-night comics kicked off the air. The president who has weaponized the Federal Communications Commission to do his bidding. The president who has waged a war on academia and, of course, the media. The most recent rankings of press freedom internationally from Reporters Without Borders are dominated in the best way by European nations. Norway is number 1. Ireland, I'm glad to say, is a creditable number 7. The UK, an acceptable number 20. And the United States, number 57, nestled between Sierra Leone and Gambia. Maybe, just maybe, when it comes to free speech, MAGA isn't in any position to be casting the first stone.
Very provocative, Niall.
We will disagree on this one, because
yes.
we've disagreed on this one before.
Yes. Obviously, you know more about these 4 incidents you highlighted than I do. There's nothing really I can say for a couple of them. That last one, though, does strike me. The political figure being made mocked in a sexual way or likened to a white woman having sex with a black man, something like that. Crude, coarse, but seems to me something that absolutely ought to be permitted as a kind of political satire. And how is that different in characteristic? You criticize, and I do as well, Trump inveighing against late-night comics, but one of the staples of Stephen Colbert, for example, has been to associate Trump and Putin like they're having sex or something, like it's a gay sex thing. Trump's sexuality, his physicality, his persona is mocked in crude and coarse and graphic terms by our progressive media, and it is celebrated, as it should be, as a cherished First Amendment right. So I don't know what is different, and this seems to me exactly that kind of thing, exactly the kind of attacks Trump has faced, and not just Trump, as of our political figures stretching back and back through time.
Well, for a start, I have never liked that propensity to mock the Trump-Putin relationship in sexual terms.
I don't like it, but I would defend it, to the death on First Amendment terms.
I mean, I think that the difference is that in the German case, the suggestion, because a much lower profile figure for a start, is that the person was actually suggesting that the German politician in question was, is it obvious mockery, or are they suggesting that she has some weird, I don't know, sexual motivation for dealing in the way she does? There is also, of course, the increasing issue of the use of deep fakes and AI and all of that to create images that are plausible but false, plausible but faked. And I think that obviously female politicians are targeted with that more so than male politicians.
Well, we have defamation and libel too. Our standards are it's harder to prove under the U.S. standard, but I would not, maybe in the most free speech kind of philosophical thinking, I might actually be theoretically in favor of getting rid of that. But we do have that, so. If you manipulate an image and genuinely, misrepresent something as happening that didn't happen, that is what defamation was literally designed to prevent, accusing someone of having a venereal disease or something falsely and then impacting their reputation, and then they would suffer job loss. That is the textbook thing that this category of law is designed to protect. So we should have that, and we might have to update those laws as new technology develops. I know, we had one thing in the U.S. in California to target deep fakes that got struck down on First Amendment grounds. You might be able to craft something that, copyright, when pirating music became a thing, then copyright law got updated. You can't do that. That's illegal. So something like that could apply to the circumstances, I'm open to hearing it. But when political figures, let me say this, when political figures start to use the quantity of harassment they're getting as some kind of, as an excuse to do, I mean, censorship, I think, of mockery is something I'd be more worried about. I mean, you got to have thick skin to be in the business of doing politics. I'm less sympathetic to those cases than a case of a truly, ordinary citizen, not a political figure, facing waves of online harassment. Maybe there should be something done differently. But the political figures, you got to get down in the muck if you're going to purport to govern, is what I would say.
I shall give you the last word on that, Rob.
All right, Niall, what's in your notes today?
Well, today, Robbie, we go back to yesterday when President Trump was rude to a female reporter. I know, try to contain your shock, right? Rachel Scott of ABC News was in the firing line this time around. Now, the point I want to make today goes well beyond Trump's hectoring or boorish behaviour, which we see often toward women, and even more so toward women of colour like Scott. But let's look at the behaviour first. Here's Scott at the White House asking Trump about the massively controversial second strike on a boat in the Caribbean in which reportedly 2 people were killed. Let's watch.
Mr. President, you said you would have no problem with releasing the full video of that strike on September 2nd off the coast of Venezuela. Secretary Hegseth now says...
You said that. I didn't say that. This is ABC fake news.
It was anything but fake news, which I'll come to in a second. But here's Scott, moments later, trying to pin Trump down on what he actually means.
Are you committed to releasing the full video?
Didn't I just tell you that?
You said that it was up to Secretary Hegseth.
You're the most obnoxious reporter in the whole place. Let me just tell you, you are an obnoxious, a terrible reporter, and it's always the same thing with you.
First things first, Rachel Scott is an excellent reporter, and she's completely professional. I have never seen her be remotely obnoxious. Trump's treatment of her drew plenty of social media heat. But for once there was light as well. Light that was shed on Trump's mendacity. Because remember his comment of, "I didn't say that," just there? He did very much say it. Here he is just last week speaking to Selena Wang, also of ABC News.
You released video of that first boat strike on September 2nd, but not the second video. Will you release video of that strike so that the American people can see for themselves what happened?
I don't know what they have, but whatever they have, we'd certainly release, no problem.
Apparently it is a problem. See, it's easy to get caught up in Trump's theatrical rudeness, but it's also important to keep an eye on when and why he behaves that way. Rachel Scott was asking if the President of the United States would keep his word on transparency over a matter of real importance. And the answer seems to be no. We see this pattern again and again. It's not just that Trump indulges in the kind of petty bullying that would get a middle manager in an office park fired. It's that he does it with the dual purposes of intimidation and diversion, to discourage the line of questioning and to distract the public from his own refusal to provide reasonable answers. For example, here he is on Air Force One on November 30th, being asked about his cognitive health by Wei Zhejiang of CBS News.
What part of your body was the MRI looking at?
I have no idea. It was just an MRI. What part of the body? It wasn't the brain because I took a cognitive test and I aced it. I got a perfect mark, which you would be incapable of doing. Goodbye, everybody. You too.
And here he is to Nancy Cordes, also of CBS News, over Thanksgiving, when asked about the Afghan man charged in the shooting of 2 National Guard troops, one fatally. The man in question had been granted asylum in the US this April, that is, during the Trump administration. And though he entered the country during President Biden's tenure, such people were customarily vetted, contrary to what Trump had previously claimed. Here's what happened.
Why do you blame the Biden administration?
Because they let him in. Are you stupid? Are you a stupid person? Because they came on a plane along with thousands of other people that shouldn't be here, and you're just asking questions because you're a stupid person.
Of course, I haven't mentioned the most honestly disgraceful example of all. You'll remember that Trump admonished another female reporter, Catherine Lucy of Bloomberg, with the words, "quiet piggy." But do you remember what or who he was being asked about? It was Jeffrey Epstein. See, that's the thing. Of course Trump's behaviour is obnoxious, but his obnoxiousness has a purpose: to distract and to evade. I'd like to know why he seems set to break his word on the boat strike video. I'd like to know why he's so weird about questions over his cognitive abilities. And I'd certainly like to know why he gets so jumpy over Jeffrey Epstein. The spectacle of his anger shouldn't distract us from finding out. All that sound and fury signifies something. It's like a map to the things Trump seems most eager to hide.
Well, I mean, what can I say? I think Trump should use more civil language when addressing the press. I think mixing it up with them is fine to some degree, and he goes well beyond it. I don't know that in recent days, certainly his comments have seemed more derisive toward women in particular. Historically, he's also accosted other White House reporters who are men, things he said about not just Mika, but Joe Scarborough too, etc. But that's, it's okay. He's really awful to and rude to men too. I'm not sure is such a defense. I think he certainly values women that he likes and agree with who support him. Is Susie Wiles is his chief of staff. I don't think he is dismissive of women overall. I think he is dismissive of women he doesn't like, who ask him questions that are frankly not even that unfair. Is what I would argue here is that he is evincing a hostility that comes from frustration. I think, if I'm reading between the lines, I think he's a little bit frustrated with where the administration is at this point. Go back to a year ago, they were riding high. They had just, won massive victory, Trump's biggest victory yet in the presidential sweepstakes. Were taking total power. Democrats totally defeated, left scattered, no meaningful opposition, media broken, win, and the approval ratings are not there right now because I would argue they messed up the economy, doing exactly the kind of policies that everyone warned would mess up the economy, and so the approval ratings are down, and he is now lashing out at media for asking him basically reasonable questions about, well, you said this. Will you do this? What about this? That he should be perfectly capable of answering. And I think it's not strategically sound.
See, I agree that he is frustrated. I think that's certainly true. Every president, as you well know, gets frustrated about media coverage and complains about it.
We saw Obama frustrated.
Yeah, we did not see Obama behave in any of these kinds of ways. On the point about women and Trump's treatment of women...
Bush was always remarkably unfrustrated with the media, actually.
He's just kind of casual kind of guy. But on the point about women, it is true that Trump has a long record of insulting everybody. Sometimes I think because Trump is so outlandish, it is more difficult to measure how his behaviour changes. I do think it has become worse very recently with women, where he seems to attack them more vociferously. And part of the frustration that you mentioned seems, to my mind, from his general demeanour, to be an idea that women are somehow disrespecting him by asking him completely legitimate questions, as we saw in all those clips that we just played. There was also another one recently, I can't remember who he accused of insubordination, but if I recall correctly, that was also a female journalist asking a legit question. So I just don't think that treatment is remotely defensible or acceptable. Like I said in the actual notes, it would get people in normal jobs fired. I don't see why it should be acceptable.
Well, maybe in the woke era, Niall, we're past that.
Get now people fired even in the non-woke era. I don't think that's purely wokeness at all,
All right, Niall, what's in your notes today?
Well, Robbie, last night President Trump went to Pennsylvania to give a speech. The word in advance of that speech was that it would address the concerns that so many Americans have over the cost of living. But before the president began this supposed effort to reconnect with everyday folks and their money worries, he limbered up by giving an interview to Politico, and he spoke with Dasha Burns. There weren't many signs that he feels people's pain. Let's watch.
Economy, sir, here at home, and I wonder what grade you would give your
A+.
economy. A+.
Yeah, A++++++.
Well, it's interesting.
Now, of course, this kind of braggadociousness will raise a smile with some. Donald Trump, it would be fair to say, has never been overly encumbered by modesty. But the kind of hyperbole that could maybe be seen as amusing when the Trump of the 1980s boasted about his buildings or his casinos is a lot less amusing when he's president and millions of Americans are in real economic distress. It wasn't as if Trump's Politico interview was a one-off. He seemed extremely reluctant last week to acknowledge there is any problem at all with prices. And that attitude resulted in him handing this gift to Democrats.
But the word affordability is a Democrat scam. They say it and then they go into the next subject. And everyone thinks, oh, they had lower prices. No, they had the worst inflation in the history of our country.
Now, before we get to the scam part of that comment, a brief fact check, because those are always useful when a president invents false facts as easily and as often as Trump does. Inflation under Joe Biden was certainly high, but it was not close to the highest inflation in the history of the United States. Higher inflation was seen in the early 1980s and in 1974 and just after the Second World War. More to the point, inflation under Biden had come down roughly 2/3 by January of this year, from a peak of 9.1% to 3%. January is, of course, when Trump took office, and inflation is unchanged since then. The most recent figures we have from September show it's still at 3%. All of that is bad news for a president who won last year's election, in part on his promises to bring prices down fast, on day one, as he sometimes said. But the scam comment we just watched was an even bigger political problem, because even for Trump, it's politically just dumb to tell voters to disbelieve what they're seeing and feeling every day of their lives. In Pennsylvania last night, Trump came at least a bit closer than he normally does to admitting an error on that point. Sort of. Let's watch.
And the word affordability is the exact same thing. And I can't say affordability hoax because I agree the prices were too high, so I can't go to hoax because they'll misconstrue that. But they use the word affordability, and that's their only word. They say affordability, and everyone says, oh, that must mean Trump has high prices. No, our prices are coming down tremendously.
Once again, prices are not coming down tremendously or otherwise. Those latest figures for September showed the unadjusted price of beef up year on year by almost 15%, coffee by almost 19%, bananas by almost 7%. And, by the way, rent, usually the biggest expense for the many millions of Americans who don't own their own homes, was up 3.4%. Trump's blame Biden strategy seems to be running out of steam fast as well. A Fox News poll last month asked registered voters whether Biden or Trump is more responsible for the state of the economy. 62% said Trump, while just 32% said Biden. And that same Fox poll had even worse news for the president. It asked whether people felt they had been personally helped or hurt by Trump's economic policies. Only 15%, 1/5, said they had been helped. More than 3 times as many, 46%, said they had been hurt. Does Trump have a plan? That's unclear. Earlier this week, he announced a $12 billion bailout for farmers. That is, 12 billion taxpayer dollars handed over to ease a problem that was caused in large part by Trump's own tariff policies. But never fear, if tariff pressures ramp up further, the president has a belt-tightening plan. Let's hear more about that.
You can give up certain products. You can give up pencils. Because under the China policy, you know, every child can get 37 pencils. They only need 1 or 2, you know. They don't need that many. But you always need steel.
Trump's bumper sticker, I don't feel your pain, but buy fewer pencils. I'm not really sure that that's the slogan many Republicans want to run on when they face an angry nation in next year's midterms.
Ooh, I had not seen that clip yet of the you don't need that many choices of pencils.
Yeah.
Oh, that is a real bad message in my view. Frankly, it's a message I associate with like Bernie Sanders and the left.
Supply controls, state controls.
Limits, well, you don't need more choices for, was it shaving cream or whatever that came up? That's what some people on the very hard left say, that capitalism is creating all these choices and we don't need that and it's confusing and disorienting. So leave that talking point behind. I agree with this notes of yours.
There we go. Wonders will never cease, Robbie. Happens once in a while.
Topic where we're on the same page, indeed. Bailing out farmers, I hate this. Making their situation worse with the tariffs and then giving them a bailout. Just don't do the tariffs in the first place and you wouldn't need to do the bailout. Bailouts are bad. The tariffs are bad. He knows he can't, I'm glad he recognizes he can't call affordability crisis a hoax because affordability is not good enough. But yes, Democrats are talking about it. To defang this talking point, you're going to need to do more. It's been a year. You get a year when you win an election. You've had a year. The inflation is better, but it's not fixed, and the prices are still bad. And it's just as clear as day that the tariffs, if you had not done the tariffs are going to tank the rest of the agenda. Because Republicans lost with the Miami. We had these
Miami mayoral
elections last
night.
Miami mayoral election for the first time in 30 years. We know exactly what the problem is. The problem is that it's not necessarily that everyone is swapping back to the Democratic Party, but Trump can't turn out when he's not on the ballot. His converted, less likely to vote people, and also there are swing voters out there who believed what Trump was going to do for the economy, particularly young people, I think. And have not been sold. And it's the tariffs. It's not just the tariffs, but that's the big one, where he has charged full steam ahead with a policy that everyone who knows anything about economics advised was going to be a problem. And here we are.
I think that point about the uncommitted or swing voters politically is a very important one because, look, obviously we talk about Trump almost every day on here. For a massive swathe of the population, their views of him are very, very fixed, be that positively or negatively.
And that's the kind of people we interact with in our daily lives as media reporters. So it's funny to picture this vast mass of people who are like, I could go either way on Donald Trump, but they exist and they decide the election.
Right, and they often decide their votes on economic conditions, which is, of course, a completely valid grounds to decide those
100%.
on. And the inflation that had taken place under Biden obviously hurt him, and then, of course, by extension, Kamala Harris, when she took over the ticket in those circumstances. So I think that for people who voted for Trump because they believed he would improve their economic lives, he would put more money in their pockets. That looks a very dodgy bet now. And yes, he is constitutionally prohibited, whatever Steve Bannon might think, about running for a third term. But I do think it has the capacity to hurt Republicans generally in elections.
Yeah, it's so the tariffs. I actually saw Elizabeth Warren yesterday tweet something about how shoe prices have gone up massively, and how she, of course, for her agenda, it has to be because there's been consolidation in the shoe industry.
Shoeopolis.
And I looked it up a little bit. No, it's entirely due to the tariffs. That's the vast majority, a huge, massive increase in shoe prices. That is true, what she said, but the reason is just the tariffs. We got Republicans, Trump, someone to get to them, we got to fix the tariffs. The whole administration, the whole agenda will collapse if they don't get sane on this policy.
We were just admiring our studio manager, Kit's enormously flamboyant footwear today. We must ask her whether tariffs affect footwear prices.
We'll have to ask about the price of that. Good idea. Niall, what's in your notes today?
Well, Robbie, President Trump held a roundtable discussion at the White House yesterday. At the end of it, he took questions for quite a while from reporters. But that came to an abrupt end after Trump was asked by a journalist from CNN about the controversial boat strike in the Caribbean. The CNN journalist said accurately that Democratic lawmakers were pushing for full video of that strike to be released. And here's what happened.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know about lawmakers. Which lawmakers? You're talking about
Mostly
Democrats?
Democrats are talking about trying to release it.
I mean, the people that you work for, the Democrats? You know you work for the Democrats, don't you? You're basically an arm of the Democrat Party. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it.
Now, on one level, that's pretty standard Trump behavior. The president evading a legitimate question, trying to browbeat the reporter, and for all his macho posturing, running away. That's how I see it. I also understand that his jabs at CNN delight many conservatives who cheer him on. But yesterday, and today, and tomorrow, what Trump is saying and doing in relation to CNN should concern everyone, very much including those conservatives who purport to care about the heavy hand of government. At issue are rival bids to buy CNN's parent company and Trump's very open desire to meddle in that process. If you haven't been following the corporate shenanigans, a quick summary. CNN's parent company is Warner Brothers Discovery, or WBD. A few days back, a deal was announced between WBD and Netflix. Netflix would buy much of the business, but it would not include CNN in that deal. Then on Monday, Paramount entered the picture. It launched a hostile takeover bid hoping to thwart Netflix. And here's the important part, the Paramount bid is for the whole company, including CNN. Now, why is this so politically vital? Because Paramount is led by David Ellison, the son of Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison is one of the richest men in the world as co-founder of Oracle, and crucially, he is also a friend and ally of Donald Trump. The younger Ellison recently took ownership of CBS News, which is already showing signs of a rightward shift. Does Trump have leverage on the CNN matter? Oh yes, he certainly does. The Justice Department, led by MAGA loyalist Pam Bondi, could block the Netflix deal on antitrust grounds. And that would clear the way for the rival bid, delivering CNN into the hands of Trump's friends, the Ellisons. Two more details. The Wall Street Journal reported earlier this week that David Ellison has, quote, offered assurances to Trump administration officials that if he bought Warner, he'd make sweeping changes to CNN, end quote. And get this, his bid is also backed by a private equity firm led by the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. This sounds all very Pravda, or Ministry of Truth. So it's just as well we have a president who rises above such selfish concerns and remains impartial, right?
Well, I'm not involved in that. I will be probably involved, maybe involved in the decision. It depends. You have some good companies bidding on it. I think the people that have run CNN for the last long period of time are a disgrace. I think it's imperative that CNN be sold, because you certainly wouldn't want to put people, just leave those people with some money, good money, and CNN so that, you know, they can spend even more money spreading poison because it's lies.
Again, only one of the two bids on the table involves CNN being sold. What Trump is arguing as imperative here is the selling of a major news organization to his friends because he doesn't like its coverage. Of course, that's causing outrage among liberals. But if you're a principled conservative and you think a president should have that power, what? Why would you think that? Even media rivals to CNN see the dangers. Here's Ari Melber of MS Now, previously MSNBC, recapping Trump's recent history of media interference.
He's tried to sue the messenger, and he got some strong-arm settlements from media companies. He tried to cancel the messenger, the failed bid to get Jimmy Kimmel fired. He tries to bully the messenger, lashing out at reporters with insults and attacks that would have seemed completely like another place, time, or country in any other era.
And Melber, who was speaking presciently on Tuesday before Trump's White House performance yesterday, put the argument exactly right.
Now, the First Amendment protects the Ellisons too. They may buy and run media how they see fit. An honest First Amendment advocate defends their speech and media, or MAGA media, or Fox News, right along with everyone else's free speech. But the problem does come in if the federal government, Trump, abuses power to interfere in this free market, trying to distort what you see, what you hear, to help his own government. And that's at the cost of free speech and perhaps the truth itself.
You can argue about the flaws of any news outlet. We all have them. But we can't have a free media or an authentic democracy if the people who deliver the news are in the president's grip. And that's why plans by Trump for CNN cannot be allowed to stand.
Well, I agree completely, but this is a demonstration of the, I would argue, the validity of my ideology. I have never wanted these large decisions made by private companies to be subjected to the whims of political or governmental forces. I mean, I would say, not maybe necessarily to you, but to the hard left, that you're getting exactly what your policy calls for. Substantial review of the mergers of major companies by the government. This is what it looks like. And I'm sorry you imagined that these kind-hearted bureaucrats would be making decisions about how big a company is allowed to be and who gets to buy who with just the best, most specialist, most disinterested considerations, and it would all be happy fantasy, tra-la-la. No, we live in the real world where the people in our government are Trump and his people. They won the election. They won a majority of the vote. They won legitimately, and they've staffed it with people who would do what he wanted. I would say that if Democrats won, they'd staff it with people who want to do what Democrats want, and they would pretend they're making those consolidations for the good of others. You think they're not thinking about their political interests? Trump is just more obvious about it. I think it's wrong. I would not give the DOJ or the FTC or the FCC any power over any of these things, and then we wouldn't have a problem.
Robbie, I enjoy the flair and elan that you bring to these arguments.
Yes.
But you can't seriously contend that Trump's view of how to use the levers of government power is the same as Joe Biden's or George Bush's or Bill Clinton's. He clearly seeks to use regulatory power or executive power in a much more muscular and obviously selfish way.
I think he uses it in a more obviously selfish way. I'm not sure he uses it fundamentally differently from, those people might not have had the imagination to do it in the way he has, or there might have not been the opportunity. The federal government wasn't as powerful in the 90s as it is now. What he's doing, to my mind, is not tonally different at all from what Elizabeth Warren, for example, would do with this power. Elizabeth Warren, who sent letters to social media platforms and news providers saying, "Why do you have Newsmax in your offerings? Take it down. Why are you putting up a platform that has someone who said something about COVID I don't like? You should take that down, or we're going to look at what legitimate arguments we have to stop you." Trump is doing it to benefit himself personally.
Which is a very important difference
to you. It's not an important difference to me.
It's obviously different if you're protesting what you cast as misinformation about public health versus this media organization criticizes me, therefore I'm going to take it away and give it to my pals. That's a different thing.